For just 5 days in 1912, the Roman goddess Diana looked after the first-class families of the RMS Titanic. From the fireplace mantel in the first-class lounge, a roughly 2-foot-tall bronze statuette known as Diana of Versailles served as the centerpiece of the most finely detailed room aboard the most luxurious ship ever built. Well-traveled first-class passengers would have known the statuette from the larger-than-life marble original in the Louvre, where she resides to this day, but Titanic's Diana found her far less prestigious home on the ocean floor when her lounge was torn open during the sinking and she was ripped from her mantle. 1 year after his discovery of the Titanic wreck in 1985, Dr. Robert Ballard happened to capture Diana on camera, giving this piece of fine art her first audience in 74 years. Unfortunately, this would be the last known sighting of Diana. It is possible that Ballard and others have known the exact location of this statuette, but a tradition of secrecy has ensured that this historically valuable artifact would remain lost. But every now and then, a needle is found in a haystack twice. Just last month, a team of dedicated researchers and divers managed the impossible, hunted down the goddess of the hunt, and took her first photograph in 38 years. This week on Witness Titanic, our investigation continues as we call to the stand the goddess Diana, Titanic's newest survivor. We will talk all about this priceless artifact and tell a bit of the story that led to her incredible rediscovery. I'm James Penca, the chairman of this modern Titanic inquiry. I was present for this artifact search and rediscovery, so for once, I was an actual witness to something we will talk about on this podcast. So let's dive right in. Welcome, one and all, to an unbearably exciting episode of Witness Titanic. You may have expected a third episode recorded from the research vessel of the expedition. I promised 3, and I probably will post the third one at some point, but I felt Diana could not wait. Just yesterday, which for me is September 1st, we announced the news that Diana was rediscovered, as well as the bow railing news. So I just felt like I should get this out to you as soon as I can. I was too excited to talk about it. So we will hold on to that expedition episode for next week, perhaps. We will see. I should first welcome new listeners and new viewers that may have found our podcast through the news of Diana's rediscovery. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is my lighthearted attempt to conduct the first inquiry into the loss of Titanic since the United States and the United Kingdom conducted their own investigations 112 years ago. Every episode, we speak to a different expert, a Titanic expert, or we dive into the century-old testimony of a survivor. We've already learned so much about Titanic in just 10 episodes, and I have so many witnesses that I still want to speak to beyond this. So I encourage everybody, all of our new listeners, if this is your first time here after this episode, go back to episode 1 and join our investigation. Lastly, before we dive in, big thanks to RMS Titanic Incorporated for bringing me along on the 2024 expedition as their researcher, trusting the team at Titanic Honor and Glory for devoting time to the statuette search, the expedition team, Troy Lene, David Gallo, and everybody else. They could have brushed us off and spent our time over the wreck a million other ways, but I told them Diana was worth it, and thankfully they agreed, so Diana would still be lost if it wasn't for them, and this episode would not exist. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about Diana. So over these last 3 episodes, we spoke with Thomasina Ray, David Gallo, and Rory Golden. And in case you missed those episodes, we covered some pretty important topics concerning the wreck, the company, artifact recovery. So we should just briefly go over those topics so this story will all make sense. So we'll do a very quick recap. RMS Titanic Incorporated is the company that operates the artifact exhibits around the world. You may have been to one on a vacation or a school field trip. If you haven't, highly recommend that you do. Seeing a moment in history in front of you, objects that spent a century on the ocean floor, it is enough to move you to tears, to drop your jaw to the floor, and inspire you a number of ways. I myself went to an exhibit when I was just 10 years old, and it drastically changed me and inspired me to love Titanic. And so here I am 20 years later, still devoting my life to it. So not only does RMST operate those exhibits, some of which travel all around the world, they also are the entity that recovers the artifacts for the exhibits. As the salver in possession of the wreck site, RMST is literally obligated to care for the artifacts they recover for the remainder of the artifact's life, which in many cases is forever. But they also are obligated to display the artifacts in exhibits so the public can see them. Everybody should be able to witness and be inspired by history, and so the exhibits exist for this purpose. Also worth noting, RMS Titanic Incorporated does not touch the wreck itself, the two large halves of the ship. They only recover artifacts from the debris field. This was done, I assume, because there are many people that believe the ship should be left alone altogether. In fact, some of you listening and watching may fall into that camp. Some go as far as saying that the wreck is a gravesite, but I am confident that the story I will share with you today may provide a bit of firsthand context that will show why artifact recovery, provided that the artifacts are displayed publicly, is one of the few truly magical things that we can do in the aftermath of a tragedy. So please know throughout this episode, yes, I think those artifacts on the ocean floor tell Titanic's story better than I ever could. I do believe that we should recover them while we still can. But I also love and respect that ship with my whole entire being and have devoted my life to it. So while I don't consider Titanic a gravesite, I certainly expect the ship and her artifacts to be treated with that level of respect and care. Over the decades, RMST has recovered 5,500 artifacts, with the last expedition to the wreck site being 14 years ago. There's no question that artifacts have been lost during that time. We are on the clock. Titanic is returning to nature, as we saw on this expedition. It's a beautiful thing, but we're losing more and more of Titanic's story to bacteria and currents. So RMST knew that if expeditions were going to happen, they needed to happen soon. So over a year ago, planning began. The goals of the 2024 expedition were very simple. Let's create the most comprehensive and detailed map of the entire wreck site. Many maps and scans exist of the bow and the stern, the two most famous parts of the ship, but all around them sits millions of pieces of debris and wreckage in what is called the debris field. The field has been photographed in small areas. ROVs and submersibles have videos of some of it, but never has a team attempted to capture it like this expedition intended to capture it. I cannot tell you how much of the wreck site was photographed for the first time on Expedition 2024. Now, on this expedition, there were no plans to go inside the wreck or recover any artifacts. They were simply going to image everything that they could, use that data gathered to plan future artifact recovery expeditions. And as custodians of the wreck, it's also good for RMST to see the shape that the ship is in and monitor any changes. You know, Titanic's changing all the time. In fact, Titanic is sort of the perfect science experiment. You know, she was a brand new ship when she hit the ocean floor. So various science communities are also interested to see what we can learn from her. So there's so many reasons to visit Titanic, but today we are only going to talk about one of them. So that's why RMST was at the wreck site. That is why Expedition 2024 was at the wreck site. But why was Diana there? Let's get to know this week's witness. The original Diana of Versailles is a larger-than-life-size marble statue of the goddess Diana, the goddess of the hunt. Now, I'm not an art scholar, so I'm going to read to you directly from the Louvre website, so we all know the basics behind Miss Diana. So the Louvre tells us, this work was a gift from Pope Paul IV to the French King Henry II and was one of the first ancient statues to arrive in France. The goddess, Diana to the Romans, Artemis to the Greeks, you've probably heard it as both, was Apollo's twin sister, the goddess of chastity and a tireless hunter whose arrows could punish the misdeeds of men. She is depicted here accompanied by a deer. The statue is based on a 4th century BC Greek bronze. It has been copied, cast, and imitated many times in modern Europe in engravings, ceramics, and small bronzes. So back in Titanic's time, it was common for shipbuilders to fill their most luxurious vessels with beautiful tapestries, murals, statuettes, and so much more to give the passenger the feeling that they were not on a ship at all, but in some beautiful hotel or a manor or a palace. This was sort of the name of the game at the time, and passengers noticed. Many wrote letters home from Titanic herself saying that she looked and felt more like a hotel than a ship. Due to her size, she didn't bob around in the water, which made that hotel feeling hit home even more. And so if you look back at a few episodes ago when we talked with Mike Brady, we talked about how we aren't so far removed from when crossing the Atlantic was hell. So you can understand why people regarded Titanic so highly. She was such a fine ship that she made you feel like she wasn't a ship at all. This brings us to the first class lounge. The lounge aboard Titanic was on A deck, which is one deck below the boat deck where all the infamous lifeboats would be found. This room would serve as a place for families. The men had the smoke room down the hall. The women had the reading and writing room right next door to the lounge. The gymnasium, the pool, the Turkish bath, they all had assigned times for men and women. Children weren't even allowed to dine with their parents in the dining saloon. So the lounge was a place for all first-class families, men, women, children, to enjoy together. And Harland & Wolff, the company that built Titanic, did not spare a dime on this space. Let's take a little tour around the lounge. It was designed in the Louis XV style, paneled in English oak, and even had a raised ceiling. So this was one of the most spacious rooms on board. In fact, if you went up to the boat deck directly above the lounge, you would have to step up a small set of stairs to get to the raised roof over the lounge. This not only made the room more spacious, but it also made it brighter because the windows of the lounge could extend past the boat deck level. So light was coming down from the boat deck, which didn't have a cover on it, so lots of light coming from the boat deck, and then some light coming from the A-deck promenade. Just a very, very smart design all around. The lounge was open from 8 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. Passengers could enjoy snacks, tea, coffee, alcohol, cigarettes, cigars. 2 stewards would serve these refreshments while a third worked in a nearby pantry, putting everything together. Reading materials could be acquired from the mahogany bookcase in the room, which made it sort of like a library as well. The White Star Line made certain that the lounge bookcase was always supplied with a collection of recent works along with the classics. Directly opposite the bookcase was an electric fireplace. Above the fireplace, on the mantel overlooking the room, was a 2-foot-tall bronze recreation of Diana of Versailles. This statuette was picked with very clear intentions, as the entire room was meant to evoke the Palace of Versailles. So what could be more palatial than a statue that some of these first-class passengers would have just seen in the Louvre days before, potentially? Unfortunately for Diana, she would only spend a few days in the lounge, or maybe a few weeks total, as on April 15th, as we all know, in the final moments of the sinking, Titanic split right through the lounge, or at least the aft end. So Diana, who's on the forward end of the lounge facing aft, would have just seen the back wall of her lounge just rip off the rest of the room, and soon water would come flooding in. Now, Diana, from what we can tell, was bolted to the mantle and should theoretically still be in the ship to this day, but due to the violence of the sinking and the descent to the ocean floor, she was torn from her bolts and landed in the debris field, where she would sit in darkness all by herself for 74 years. Until in 1986, she would have seen a light approach her, the first light that she has seen since 2:17 a.m. on April 15th, 1912. This light would soon reach Diana, and a photo was taken. This expedition, like the one that discovered the ship the year before, was headed up by Dr. Robert Ballard. Now, we have to assume that Ballard was just exploring the debris field at random and happened across this statuette. This, in itself, is remarkable. The odds of coming across this tiny statue in a half a mile, square mile debris field just blows my mind. Now, unfortunately, her location was not shared with the world. So, if Diana was ever to be seen after this moment, someone else would have to defy the odds like Ballard once did and happen across her again. And I am happy to say that we did just that. So that is why Diana was in the debris field. Why was I in the debris field? Well, as many of you know, I'm not just a host of a podcast. For the last decade, I have been working with an incredible group of researchers at Titanic Honor and Glory. This group began as a video game project. If you are a Titanic person, you have likely heard of us or seen some of our virtual recreations in documentaries, or maybe our Titanic sinks in real time videos that people really like. We're also very, very famous for perpetually working on a virtual recreation of Titanic. We don't really refer to it as a video game anymore. We think of it more as a virtual museum, but we always have a bunch of other stuff going on and cool things in development. And while we are terrible video game developers, we are responsible for some pretty cool Titanic content, and we're going to keep trying to do that. So after we, as a company at THG, we changed directions a few years ago and started to focus on historic content, not making video games and all that. We wanted to be a little more serious. When we did that, we caught the eye of RMST, partly because of our unrivaled visuals, which are very useful to them in their exhibits, but also because we have a genius team of researchers who I consider to be the next generation of Titanic historians. So we partnered with RMST. That led to an invite for THG to be sort of an on-call group of researchers to assist the expedition while it was being conducted. As the expedition approached, RMST asked us to put together a list of artifacts that they may want to keep an eye out for. They asked other knowledgeable folks as well. We weren't the only ones. In fact, they also let us ask our fan base what our fans wanted to see. So a lot of people sent in their suggestions to the expedition team. But on our list, we had Diana of Versailles. It was clearly a target that needed to be pursued. It's actually a perfect target. Here's why. First of all, it was photographed before, so we know it's down there, or at least it was down there at some time. Two, it's made of bronze, or at least we think it is. So it should be in pretty good condition, and if a team of conservators were present when recovered, there's no reason why she can't be preserved for generations to come. Three, she's one of a kind. Aboard Titanic, that is. Olympic had her own Diana in her lounge, but in terms of artifacts that you can find on the ocean floor, even the famous Grand Staircase cherub has other cherubs to compete with. This is the only Diana that endured the Titanic sinking. Not to mention, we are also not talking about something like the Grand Stairs candelabrum, for example. That is in a known location. We can go get that anytime. We know where it is. It's been photographed. It's very well documented. But we would have to find Diana. And doesn't that make the search all the more worth doing? So Diana of Versailles was near the top of our list that we gave to RMST. I would say she was at the very top if we didn't think it was impossible to find her. We had nothing to go off of. The 1986 photo shows no context aside from a few rocks. A very close-up photo. The only way we would find her is if she happened to be inside the 2024 expedition work area, and one of the 2 million photos that we ended up taking happened to capture her. Unfortunately, as we would discover, this would not be the case. Diana would not be in any of those 2 million photos we took. So truly, if we were going to find her, we would need some sort of hint. Now, I can't go into crazy detail about like how this all happened. RMST and us, we will share this story in the future, but all you need to know for now is that our researchers were spending any free moment they had for the weeks leading up to the expedition analyzing old RMST wreck footage, looking for more artifacts to add to our list. One day, Peter Harwell, one of our newest researchers, and Nicholas Murgia, one of our longest tenured researchers, they happened to sort of jointly spot what they thought looked like Diana. It was sort of this magical moment, the start of a very exciting couple weeks for everybody. So props to those guys for giving us our first sighting of Diana since 1986, and also props to RMST for accidentally capturing her on film. So you may think that, okay, well, you had all the answers. You have a video showing Diana and all of her surroundings. Clearly, this will give us exact coordinates. Unfortunately, nothing about this search for Diana was easy. This video barely showed any more context than that 1986 photo. All it really did was confirm that the statuette was present in the year that that video was taken, which that's still great news. There was always a fear that other companies, individuals stumbled across a statue and took it. So we at least had proof, more recent proof, that she was still there. She might still be missing, but at least we knew when this video was taken, Diana was still there. The best that we could do by the start of the expedition is form a search area based off of what we learned from that video, and just hope that the expedition team would take us seriously and devote some quality time to searching for Diana, because the search would not be easy. The search area was not small, but all of that will have to be a story for a future episode. Before we jump to the actual discovery, which I'd like to share with you all, I'd like to take a moment to say, throughout the expedition, the THG research team proved themselves to be indispensable. At least once a day, somebody would have a very specific request aboard the research vessel that I could not answer. I'm a very knowledgeable researcher and all, but I am nowhere near as impressive as the Kyle Hudaks and Matt DeWinklers of the world. So I would turn to the THG team with the question, and not within minutes, within seconds, I would have a full answer with supporting images and sources. I think the longest I waited for an answer was 90 seconds, like a correct answer. The expedition team was impressed time and time again by the speed at which these gents could solve a mystery. So I truly believe that, of course, we would not have found Diana had Peter and Nico not spotted her, but I don't think the team would have let us go searching for Diana if THG hadn't proven themselves as knowing quite a bit about what they were talking about. So shout out in no particular order to Matt, Kyle, Chris, Nico, Gio, Mate, Robin, Patrick, Carol, and Peter. And a bunch of other people helped out as well, but those were the guys that they were kind of on call 24/7 for me for a whole month, and they came through time and time again. So big shout out to them. This would not have happened without them. I'll say this about the search, just so you know where my mind was at the time. We had gone on a few excursions to find Diana and came up empty each time. As I said, the search area we had put together was large and, as we would discover, not quite as helpful as we thought. So, granted, after each excursion, we followed each failure with new research and new search areas, and we tried again. Amélie Chesson of 3D at Depth deserves a shout out here as well. She and I worked together very closely after each attempt and tried to see where we went wrong and what we could do if we got one more chance. And partly because THG had proven themselves, partly because Amelie's research was so solid, and partly because the leaders of this expedition by this point understood how special this find would be, we were given one more attempt, and on the very last day of the expedition, with literally hours before we had to leave the site, we were told, you will get 2 ROVs and 20 minutes. So at 4 a.m., just about 8 hours before the expedition was over, so sort of our last chance, can't can't blow this now. We set out to find our newest search area that we had chosen. Now, at this point, I was more than 100% sure that we had found the right spot. For reasons I won't get into, we'll get into in the future, I had seen enough evidence to know that we had found the spot. The only fear I had left was that the statue was no longer in that spot. So my heart was pounding. What a sad moment it would be to get to the spot where it used to be. We tracked down the actual spot we were looking for, and someone had somehow gotten their hands on it. In fact, I was already telling the entire expedition team that helped with this, everyone in the room, I was like, oh, you know what? If she's not there, this was still a great accomplishment, and it was a pleasure spending this week with everybody. Like, oh my gosh, we found the spot. If she's not there, it's going to be okay. But of course, I would have been absolutely crushed if it wasn't there. And we were all exhausted, very ready to return to land. So to go out on such a disappointment would have been the bummer of bummers. But to go out with this huge discovery on the final day, something to put a pep in our step for these last few days at sea, man, it just what a difference the next few minutes would make. So we all huddled around this little monitor, and with 20 pairs of eyes on the screen as the ROV moved forward, Diana appeared. And to give you an idea of how hard it was to spot, even with all the data we had and 20 eyes on the screen, Diana made it halfway down the screen before I shouted, "There it is." And so Diana had her first photo shoot in decades. Evan Kovacs of Marine Imaging Technologies, they were all his cameras that we were looking through. He personally lined up the shots and took these images. Absolutely gorgeous images, incredible detail of our new friend Diana. Those photos that I'm talking about, these beautiful photos of Diana, they can be found in the link in the description of this episode. Definitely check it out. In fact, I want to take a second to show you around the image. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll just put it on the screen right now. If you are listening in podcast form, just stop what you're doing and pull up this image so I can give you a little tour. If you're driving, please keep driving. You can look at the image when you get home. Everybody be safe. Okay, let's look at this image. So I'm looking at the close-up one. There's two that we've released. One's a little bit further out, and you can see a nice little crab friend. But I'm looking at the close-up. You can see that, again, Diana's like looking up to the surface. It's really something that this landed this way. In the 1986 photo, it looks like her little deer antlered friend is gone, but clearly you can see in this detail, if you look down at her feet by her left knee, you can see that the deer is still there. It looks to me like the deer's hoofs are bent towards itself, potentially from hitting the dirt, but you can still see a bit of the neck. And I think a little bit above sort of waist level to the right of Diana, there looks to be a little antler poking out. So we think that the entire animal friend is still hidden underneath the dirt, which is just something else. I am just unbelievably fascinated to think about what the deer looks like in comparison. I don't know what the difference would be. So based on what we can tell, if you look at the base of what she's standing on, it's very bent and torn a little bit because, again, she got ripped from her bolts. And it looks like she might be bent at the ankles forward. So when, if in the future this artifact is ever recovered, if you set it on her base, she would actually be leaning way forward, is what we assume, based on what we can tell. I love looking at the incredible detail of this tunic clothing that she's wearing. Each fold and wave is so beautiful and very much lines up with the statue in the Louvre. I'm not an expert on how these sorts of things were created. Obviously, it was like a cast of some sort, so it's very, very detailed. But I'm curious to see the state of her left arm. It's definitely under the dirt. But I don't know. It might be bent off. It might be gone. Who knows? But from what we can tell, there is a chance that this entire statue is still intact. And my last thing that I will point out that I absolutely love about Diana, and you won't be able to unsee it when I tell you. Based on the rock above her head, it looks like she has a party hat on. And I think that is her way of celebrating being seen again. One other thing I'll point out is a little bit above and to the right of her head, sort of in line with the tip of the party hat. There's a circular object, kind of looks like a ring, maybe. I don't know. Who knows what that could be? But there's plenty of fun things to see in this image. Even just looking at the little pebbles and stones, it's remarkable. Okay, now I'm looking at the more zoomed out one, just to point out a few more things. So we have our little crab friend, which is pretty cool. He sat there the entire time we were there, probably because he was stunned because he hasn't seen light ever in his life. The only real artifact, let me zoom in a little bit, the only real artifact worth pointing out aside from the statue, this big red piece, I believe is liticilo. It's like a subflooring, something that goes under the tiles of stuff. That material, this red broken plaster-looking material, is all over the wreck site. I mean, every inch. You can't go 10 feet without running into a piece of it because there's a lot of it on Titanic and it all got spilled out. The only other real thing worth pointing out, I suppose, is just to the right of Diana is a bathroom tile. In fact, lift up my microphone. I got one right here. This is the only little artifact. This is not from Titanic. I did not take this. This is from Harlan and Wolff. They found a bunch of extras and they've sold them. But this is the exact same tile that's in that picture. So pretty cool. People, podcast people, sorry you don't get to see the tile. So you may be asking yourself, okay, it's a bronze statue, probably not worth a lot monetarily, and I guess Titanic people will think it's cool, but what makes this artifact so special? Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Well, let me tell you why. Reason number one, this is so outrageously special. There is very little, if not no art down there on the ocean floor. There's so little beauty on the ocean floor. Art is often fragile, it is often delicate. Art has curves, it has shading, it has texture, and the ocean ruins all of that. The sinking destroyed all of that. Here we have an example of art aboard Titanic, and she remains in one piece. How magnificent. Reason two, this deserves to be seen. An artist made this, and for 5 days it was enjoyed, and for 41,000 days she has sat in darkness. With this simple picture that we took, the world can appreciate this piece of art in high definition. How magnificent. In fact, you could argue, due to the detail you can see in this photo, when you are looking at this photo, you're seeing this statue in a way that it hasn't been seen since Sunday, April 14th, 1912. Reason number three, she is a human form. Obviously, Titanic is mostly associated with death. The wreck site is so devoid of life aside from a sea cucumber or that white crab. And here is a human figure, a beautiful, powerful goddess who survived the sinking in a way. Reason number four, I think, she is literally looking up to the surface. This would not be as majestic of a story if she was facing down and we were looking at the back of her head. She's laying on her back, looking up to the surface, just waiting for someone to find her. Magnificent. Reason number five, this is so special. We had to track her down the old-fashioned way. If this statuette was within the search area of our expedition, we would have found her no matter what, like a fish in a barrel. But We had to go on an adventure during our adventure to find her. Had Ballard told us where it was, had another person given us a location, it wouldn't feel as special as it does having done the work to find her. So while this could have been way easier of a rediscovery, I honestly wouldn't change a thing. And my last reason why this is so damn special is how many people came together to make this happen. Don't let anyone tell you that something that happens in the deep ocean was accomplished by one person. It takes a city of people to do little things 2.5 miles underwater. The crew of the Dino Schwest, they were checking every day. Did you find it yet? Did you find it yet? They were so excited and supportive when we found it. They were honored to have been on board the expedition that found something so unique. You know, this vessel was usually an anchor handling vessel, and suddenly they worked on a priceless piece of art discovering vessel. How cool for them. The ROV teams from Sea Innovation, when we were searching for the statuette and we reached a shift change at noon or midnight, the guys whose shift was over refused to get up until we either found the statue or called off the search. They wanted to find this Diana so bad. And when we did, the 3 pilots who were on when it happened to happen, they were so honored to have been there, so happy to have been there. You know, they're used to working on oil rigs and looking at pipes underwater, and their families were so proud of them for doing something so interesting, and here they were part of something special, and that just was a really cool experience to share. The data scientists at 3D at Depth, but also the other companies on board, Ocean Floor Geophysics, 9 North, Linnae Incorporated, and of course Marine Imaging Technologies, who made the cameras and took the photos. The entire discovery was a group effort, particularly our friend Amelie at 3D at Depth. And of course, RMST and THG, a partnership that was born out of THG focusing on what we do best, not some video game of the century, but just boring old research, and RMST recognizing that not every Titanic historian is going to be found in a documentary or writing a book. Some of them are young, some of them are nerds who hang out on Discord, who you know have already made a new 3D Diana model for Project 401 and THG. You can check out that model. It's out there online as well. And lastly, why is this so special? And this is the most important thing of all. We have the opportunity in the future to see Diana recovered and brought to the surface. She would truly become Titanic's newest survivor and complete her journey to the United States, and then continue her travels all around the world, potentially. Now, I know some of you will want this statue left alone, like some people want everything on the debris field left alone. But, you know, to all those people, this statue, as I said at the beginning of the episode, this is the perfect example of why artifact recovery is so important. And here are my top 3 reasons why. Reason 1, yes, Titanic was the subject of one of the worst disasters in human history. We should not forget that. But we also can't forget that Titanic doesn't hit the iceberg until the 1 hour and 40-minute mark into the film Titanic. There is more to the story than death. In both the film and real life, there was romance, heroism, villains, accomplishment, innovation, laughter, joy, and beautiful works of art. There was also life aboard Titanic. Now look, I don't blame people who have this view of Titanic. There are so many stories of death with Titanic, and they're way more well known, and there's probably a higher quantity of them than there are stories of life. But that is proof in itself that we need Diana on the surface. We have an opportunity to bring a story of life and beauty to land to help balance out the many more stories of death that everyone already knows. So if you're somebody who thinks we need to leave Titanic alone, leave Diana alone, you know, because this was a terrible tragedy, that's the exact reason why we need Diana on the surface to balance it out. Reason number 2, I refuse to believe that the best place for this statue of Diana is on the ocean floor in total darkness. There are children on this planet who were taken to a baseball game and felt nothing. They were taken to a ballet recital and they did not enjoy it. These kids, they may struggle paying attention in school, like Dr. Gallo told us 2 episodes ago, that they may have a hard time focusing. They have no idea that one day they will be taken to a Titanic artifact exhibit, like some of us did, and feel their life change. The amount of children who go to a Titanic exhibit and then suddenly have more focus in school because they have a passion for history, science, writing, art, interior, decor, fashion, sculpture, museum curation. There's just so much that can inspire a child from this one statue that you won't find in a sports venue or on TikTok. Diana has the opportunity to inspire children like no other artifact in our collection, and adults even. So I just refuse to believe that the thing that we should do with this powerful piece of art is leave it on the ocean floor where no one will ever see her. There are special, valuable things in this world that you will never be able to feel unless you see it in person with your phone in your pocket. I don't mean to sound like an old man, but so be it. And my final reason why this statue needs to be recovered. And this is my favorite reason. For 5 days in 1912, this statuette was viewable only by the first class. You had to be wealthy to see her in person. Second and third class, you don't get to see this beautiful piece of art. Then she spent 74 years in total darkness until she was photographed in 1986, and her location was not shared. So again, if you wanted to see Diana in person, you had to be one of the few who had the means to do so. As Dr. Gallo told us 2 episodes ago, you shouldn't need a cap and gown to witness history like this. If we can recover Diana in the future, for the first time in this statue's history, in this statuette's life, she will be viewable by everyone, first, second, third class. Everyone will be able to witness Diana of Versailles and look into the face of beauty that endured tragedy. What could be more worthwhile than that? That sort of opportunity should be available to everyone, not just first class. And with that, the witness withdrew. Folks, that's it for this exciting episode of Witness Titanic. I am honored to have actually witnessed the rediscovery of Diana. And while I helped lead the charge to find her again, it would not have been possible without the THG researchers, Amelie, and RMS, of course. And I am honored to share this story with all of you. Next week on Witness Titanic, I think I'll just get out to you that 3rd episode I recorded on the expedition, where I take you through a bit of a day in the life at 4143 North, 4956 West. Until next time, big thanks to Ege Erdogan for the theme music. I'm your chairman, James Penca. Be nice to each other, Titanic community. I'll see you next week for the continuation of our modern inquiry into the sinking of the RMS Titanic. We will adjourn till then.